Let's move to the next game here. 49ers 23, Buccaneers 20. Andy, let's talk about 49ers here, where obviously the big story is a lot of returning players for the San Francisco 49ers. Let's start with the biggest name, of course. Christian McCaffrey gets back in here, and I know you had a lot of thoughts about this 49ers backfield and what we may or may not see. What do you think about what actually happened in this game?
Yeah, well, what actually happened is they treated Christian McCaffrey as if this was week one and he'd never been injured, right? Like he just got the full Christian McCaffrey workload. He handles 19 touches in this one. He's active as a receiver, active as a rusher. Jordan Mason got like an early courtesy carry. That was really it. And Jordan Mason has been so good. Like I don't know, whatever. I'm not Kyle Shanahan. He's freaking NFL head coach. Who am I? I'm a little bit surprised that they aren't continuing to give Jordan Mason a handful of carries, if only because like the production was there and we can save a little bit of wear with Christian McCaffrey. But whatever. If they, if this is the way it's going to be, that's great for McCaffrey managers. Hopefully he's able to hold up, but this was, he just got the full Christian, like this could have been a game log from last year or the previous season. Like this was full, ready to go, no health questions, Christian McCaffrey. And I'm assuming he's come out of the game just fine. So that's a great sign moving forward if you have him. And now you have to think about Jordan Mason more as just, this is a backup who you probably still need to roster, right? Because Christian McCaffrey has missed, 8 games this year due to injury, and he just returned. And if anything happens to him, we know that we basically have a top 5, top 6 fantasy back in Jordan Mason, but you can't, I guess the hopeful scenario was that he would be somebody that we could actually put in a flex spot and use. Can't do that. Like, I don't know if there's any possibility of like a 1 carry game behind McCaffrey. You can't use him, but you also probably shouldn't drop him unless it's like an 8-team league or something like that. So that's a big bother. I gotta say this, San Francisco wins this game, but it felt like a bad vibes win for the Niners, right? Like there were rough scenes all around. Jake Moody returned and he missed 3 field goals, and there was an on-field altercation involving Deebo Samuel and the long slapper and Moody, where Deebo like basically hit them both in the head. Long whatever.
Slapper was a bit of a Freudian slip there, Andy. But I mean,
sorry. Like I don't talk. That's fine, but maybe we shouldn't be striking teammates mid-game. That was something. Apparently. There was a long locker room session immediately following the game for the Niners. Didn't open the locker room door for a little while. So I don't know. Be interesting to hear what comes out this week about that team and its current mood. I mean, they got to win. And like Jauan Jennings, great game, 11 targets. Ricky Pearsall, sensational game. A 46-yard touchdown was a highlight play that came early. Saw another target in the end zone. They were leaning on him in the late go ahead drive. So really impressive games from both of those two.
You're right that this doesn't feel like all right, all is well with the 49ers sort of win. I mean, they barely beat a extremely banged up Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that we'll talk about in just a second now at this point. But I do want to talk about those wide receivers because I think we learned a lot about the wide receivers in this game. And, it's worth remembering that obviously the big storyline here is Christian McCaffrey's return off of the long absence. That's going to lead like basically every fantasy podcast. But I would argue that getting Jauan Jennings back in this wide receiver room is maybe not as equally impactful. But again, we learned a lot from it because we haven't seen Jennings since the game that Ayuk tore his ACL. He missed that game and then he missed the game after, and then they went on the bye. So Jennings coming back here I thought was interesting because obviously super productive fantasy game, leads the team in targets, leads the team in route participation. But it was the way that he did it I thought was really interesting, Andy, because if you look at like Jennings's role throughout the course of his career, he's always been kind of like a power slot receiver for this team. Mm-hmm. But Kyle Shanahan comes in after the game and points out in our fantasy handle, Yahoo Fantasy actually tweeted a quote graphic that from Kyle Shanahan, it's his first time playing X and he'll be doing that the rest of the year. You look at obviously I haven't watched the film on this game yet, but you look at where he lined up. He led the wide receivers in percentage of snaps outside And so he was the X receiver, which is Ayuk's vacated position. So a little bit of a role change for Jennings, but watching this game and kind of having it on the ISO TV here, I thought he played really well in this game. And it kind of makes sense, right? Because Jennings has mostly been a third down specialist, a late down guy. If you're playing on late downs, you're going to see more man coverage as that guy. And he's last season, 10 of his 19 catches came on third down, according to True Media, and he was targeted on 21.1% of his routes against man coverage compared to 13.6 against zone coverage. Again, that makes sense. Like, as that X receiver, you're going to need to beat man coverage. You're going to need to win on ISO routes. He's not going to do it in the same way that Brandon Ayuk does, but he does it well enough on these kind of like quick outbreaking routes. I posted the next gen route chart. You see just a bunch of outbreaking patterns. So I think there's a lot of staying power for Jennings, and probably, he's not, Debo's kind of his own thing, but in terms of like the Jennings Pearsall debate, I feel pretty good about Jennings a little bit ahead of Pearsall rest of the season. Although really liked what I saw out of Pearsall as kind of that slot receiver, slot flanker hybrid and both these guys might be fantasy starters going forward, but certainly want to see it also against a team that's not the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, I kind of feel like they're both fantasy starters moving forward, right? Because Pearsall has an explosive element to his game. He's playing a lot. Like, it's not at the same level of Jennings. I was a little bit surprised by Jennings' usage, if only because Pearsall was theoretically drafted basically to be a potential Brandon Ayuk replacement, and now they find themselves in a situation where they need to replace Brandon Ayuk, and they kind of plug Jennings in it. But whatever, it's fine. Like, there's playing time for all these guys alongside Kittle and Samuel, in part because Samuel is such a like weirdly high volume gadgety player. So you could, like, these guys can both see the field. Pearsall is just so explosive.
Yeah.
Highlight machine in college. If people don't know, like, just an absolutely absurd athlete, 6'3", 4.4 speed, 42-inch vertical. And like, you see the athleticism on the field. It reminds me of some of the best plays from like Christian Watson. This is a bad guy. I don't mean that he's exactly like Christian Watson, but like some of those plays in Christian Watson's first year where like dudes just took bad angles. Like they just weren't ready for him to be maybe quite as electric as he is. I just thought the touchdown was a really impressive play. And he was just impressive throughout this one. And if he's gonna play 35 to 45 snaps a game, and he's in line for 5 opportunities, 6 targets, something like that, I'm down. I'm willing to start him in 10, 12 team leagues.
Yeah, I feel you. Look, there were a few draft analysts that were higher on Ricky Pearsall than me. He was my wide receiver 5 or 6 in this class. I liked him as a late first round prospect, even though people kind of balked at that selection. Ran a route on over 70% of the dropbacks. Like you said, he saw real deal volume. Actually had the highest air yards per target among these wideouts too. So I thought Jennings playing in that X receiver role was something I didn't expect.
Yeah.
And I actually think that Pearsall not playing that role, because obviously you say he's drafted to be Ayuk's replacement. He certainly was not drafted to play the same position as Ayuk within the wide receiver room, but might have had to step up and take his volume. Like, I think this is him not playing that role, I think, is best for him long term, where Jennings, I think, surprised me by playing there. But if you just look back at his history, it actually kind of makes a little bit of sense. Let's talk Buccaneers here. I feel bad for this team, honestly, at this point. They lose Tristan Wirfs to a serious injury in this game. He's one of those tackles that changes the complexion of the offense, I think, if you don't have that guy. And they're at this point, just every single week, it's how many targets can we get to Rachaad White and Cade Otton? And that's just kind of what the offense is now at this point.
Yeah. And like, Baker Mayfield was a very fun watch in this game and still finished with only 116 passing yards, right? No receiver had over 40 yards. People are gonna see and remember the play where Baker is somehow stiff arming Bosa and holding him off for like 4, 5, 6 yards, and then completes a wild throw, I think, to Rachaad White. So that was really fun. Baker's been really fun, but he's just, the whole offense now is really on fumes. I believe they're going into a bye, which is much needed. And hopefully they can get Mike Evans back beyond that, because they're just, the worst loss is huge. But they need playmakers beyond, like Cade Otton's had a really nice run. This is always going to be a difficult matchup for Cade Otton. The Niners have some athletes who can stick to your tight end, right? But man, they they need playmakers in the worst way. And we were bound to see a game like this from Baker again, because the receiving room is so just decimated. Really impressive game again from Bucky Irving, by the way. He's just unreasonably good. 87 total yards, touchdown. He does one or two things each week that you're just not seeing from other players.